So, welcome to Sacred Trinity Church for this first of a workshop of this type where we are doing music and liturgy for. We're doing music and liturgy for Lent today. We're really pleased to have some of the Heart Edge choral scholars with us who perform for Great Sacred Music on a Saturday afternoon. But today, the idea is that we're going to introduce to you some music that might be familiar, some that might be less familiar, some resources for liturgy as well. So today we're thinking about the season of Lent. Beginning with Ash Wednesday, it's traditionally 40 days of preparation and fasting before the celebration of Easter. In my experience, good liturgy usually includes enough of the familiar for people to feel safe and rooted, whilst adding in some elements that are fresh and stimulating. I find it helpful to have a different order of service for each season, and for Lent that needs to be a little bit more penitential. As we get older, there's always a danger of getting a bit stale and recycling the same old things. So today I'm going to share some resources that I've got that I've found useful, and I'm reminding myself to be a little bit more creative as well, because like I say, it's easy to just get stuck in your ways. Apologies that I am Anglican if you're not. So I'm going to try not to be too thoroughly Anglican and share some resources that aren't from the Church of England. But I am going to begin with the Church of England, with Anglican sources. And first of all, the obvious place to begin when looking for resources for Lent is Times and Seasons from the Church of England. This is Times and Seasons, available as a lovely chunky book, which costs quite a bit of money, but also available for free on the Church of England website. I can never remember quite where it is, so I just Google Church England Liturgy and I get there. It's the Common Worship Liturgy that you're looking for, and Times and Seasons is there, fairly easy to find. And a good resource for many people to use. You know, there is lots there that you can use even if you're not Anglican. So in Times and Seasons, as well as the whole service for Ash Wednesday and prayers for the Way of the Cross, there are seasonal prayers to insert into the Eucharist. Here's a nice prayer to be said at the preparation of the table, just before the Eucharistic prayer.
God of our journey, as we walk with you on your path of obedience, sustain us on our way and lead us to your glory. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
New Patterns for Worship is another source of good material that is available online for free as well. This is organised into, instead of being themed by season, it's organised into elements of the service, so that things such as prayers or confessions or blessings are gathered together. And some of them are labelled as general, and others have themes such as incarnation, mission or cross. Cross probably being the one that we want for Lent. There are also sample services, which include a service of the Word, a service of the Word for Lent, which begins in this way. The Lord our Redeemer be with you, and also with you. God of our days and years, we set this time apart for you. Form us in the likeness of Christ, so that our lives may glorify you. And on it goes. Oh, I've forgotten to bring out my Redemptorist Press thing, but I was going to tell you that Redemptorist Press produced something called Living Word. Some of you may use it. It has a pull-out sheet for each Sunday, which includes a sermon. I've never actually preached one of those sermons, but I sometimes use them as to give me ideas. but it also includes a sentence on each reading, Kyrie confessions, intercessions, a blessing, etc. And sometimes it is excellent. Occasionally it misses the theme that I'm finding in the readings, but I've found it immensely useful over the years and highly recommend it. On the Heart Edge blog, I've put the resources that I'm recommending today, and there's a link there to the Redemptorist Press website. There is a wealth of material that is more Celtic in nature, which tends to mean that it's a little more earthy and evocative in tone. There's plenty that comes from the Iona community, such as the Pattern of Our Days from Kathy Galloway. This is themed, but not by liturgical season, but one example would be a prayer of confession, such as cross-carrying Jesus.
Cross-carrying Jesus, as you stagger on your lonely journey, time slips, world's real. Forgive us that we turn away embarrassed, uncaring, despairing. Help us to stay with you through the dark night, to watch and to wait, to know the depths of your anguish, and to realize that you carry us. Forgive us, love us. Forgive us that we get on with our work unthinking, that we gamble unknowing with precious things. Cross-carrying Jesus, nailed to the tree of life, forgive us and grant us your salvation.
So that's an example from the Pattern of Our Days. Ray Simpson has produced a book of liturgies from Lindisfarne that I actually ordered this and found it said that it came with a CD-ROM with the text of all the liturgy on it, and when I got it, it didn't have that CD-ROM, so I contacted the publishers, Kevin Mayhew, and they sent me a PDF with all the text on it. That's really useful if you're going to produce liturgy, because then you don't have to type it from scratch, but you can copy and paste. So we like that. What we're going to do with this is this has some nice Celtic kind of liturgies for the different seasons, and we're going to use evening prayer from here in a modified form to finish this workshop. Not everybody will find the style helpful. It is kind of evocative and kind of more poetic, perhaps, than common worship might be. Many will appreciate that. Some might find it a little bit annoying, but then that's a risk that you take. I wanted to tell you about some poetry. So poetry is something that we sometimes, that we could perhaps do with using a little bit more in our worship. So Malcolm Guite, in David's Crown, has produced poems that respond to the Psalms, to many of the Psalms. And the Psalms are a great source, of course, during Lent. And we're going to sing a version of a psalm later, of Psalm 139, but I thought we would listen to Malcolm Guite's response to Psalm 139.
This very night I worship and adore, for I am drawn towards your mystery. I cannot fully know you, but before I was conceived, you knew and summoned me. You called me into being, I was formed, both in my mother's womb and in the sea of your strong love. The blood that warmed my growing body also flowed in you. When you were hid in Mary's womb and formed in our humanity, I turned to you because you know my heart better than I. The darkness there was never dark to you. However low I fall, however high I rise, your loving presence meets me there, and you will still be with me when I die.
The next book I wanted to introduce to you is not particularly liturgy, but it's a book of poems by J. Hume, The Backwater Sermons. And he's produced a fantastic set of very powerful poems written through the pandemic. And I've picked out one that I think might work well during Passiontide or Holy Week.
The carpenter, he knew his son would outshine him from the beginning, so taught this child the only thing he could, the skill of taking blades and wood and turning death into something else entirely.
Canterbury Press have a really useful series called Creative Ideas for. This is creative ideas for evening prayer. It includes a lot of creative evening services, including one for Lent that uses the story of the woman caught in adultery and has a prayer action involving stones. I don't think I've ever used a whole service from here as it's written, but I've certainly used services from here, kind of adapted them to fit the context that I'm working in. And there are some great ideas in there. One thing I wanted to encourage you is that to bear in mind is that when creating perhaps a more prayerful service, if you don't have a musician, I need to be careful how I say this because I'm surrounded by musicians, but if you don't have a live musician, you might want to use some recorded music. Now you have to be very careful if you're live streaming, like which we're doing today. So I'm not going to play you any recordings because you can get into a right mess if you put recorded music into a live stream, and Facebook or YouTube might mute you, which gets all a bit embarrassing and you might get into copyright problems. But if you're leading a prayerful, quiet service in church and not streaming it, there are all sorts of lovely recorded music that you could use to help create the right sort of atmosphere. I use a lot of ambient music and film soundtracks. And if you're interested in the sort of stuff that I might use, I have created a Spotify playlist, and you can go, there's a link to the Spotify playlist on the Heart Edge website blog. So go and have a look at that. I wanted to tell you as well about fantastic resource for an audio-visual resource. And I love this. This is 40 by Cy Smith. And it's a beautiful, this is the book version, but you can find online, you can find a video where there's some music and each of these images. They're beautiful images that evoke something of what Jesus might have been going through in the 40 days in the wilderness. And when I checked Proust, who produced it, they are redoing their website, and so much of their content is not available. But when I looked for this, you could still get it for £2. That would be the best £2 on liturgical resources that you will ever spend, I promise you, because it's marvellous and wonderful. And finally, I've left it over here, but this is the book that we have here at Sacred Trinity. It's called Prayers for an Inclusive Church. And it's a lovely little book with alternative collects for each Sunday, as well as seasonal material for the Eucharist. And we're just going to listen to the collect for this coming Sunday, the first Sunday in Lent, Year C.
God of the wilderness, your Spirit leads us to face the truth, unprotected and exposed. In our times of trial, help us to resist the worship of empty power and the illusion of invulnerability, that we might find our true food in Jesus Christ, the broken bread. Amen.
And that's the liturgical resources that I'm sharing with you today. So I hope there's something in there that you find useful. What we'd love to do, we're thinking that we'll do these sorts of workshops again. And we're already planning one for the season of Easter. So we'd love to hear some feedback from you about what you want more of or less of. What we're going to listen to now is some music and introduce you maybe to the odd new piece of music. So I'm going to hand over to Andrew.
Good evening, everybody. Over the next 20 minutes or so, we'll be exploring some new hymns and some new chants, which will then all lead into the act of worship that we'll be finishing this workshop with. But let's start with some music, and this is a hymn called From Ashes to the Living Font. Let's do the first, second, and last verse. That was From Ashes to the Living Font, words by Alan Homerding. He holds degrees in theology, liturgy and music from St Mary's Seminary and University in Baltimore and the University of Notre Dame. And he's written many collections of hymn texts. So where are the best places to draw on some of this new music? There's three resources that I use in particular. That hymn was from a book called Sing Praise, published by Canterbury Press a few years ago. And it very much complements some of the more traditional hymn books like the earlier version of Ancient and Modern or New English Hymnal. And a particular feature are new words to pre-existing well-known tunes, and also introducing some new tunes as well. Within this book, there's also a number of short chant settings and a liturgical section, and it's a really good way of freshening up music in liturgy, and particularly with a church that starts at quite a traditional base and just expanding that repertoire just a little bit further. There's another hymn book which came out more recently, the new version of Hymns Ancient and Modern, which actually has got some of the material that's also contained in Sing Praise. We've just started using this at St Martin in the Fields, and it's a beautiful combination of traditional hymns and has the complete selection of traditional hymns, but alongside that, many new hymns from the Iona community, music from Teze, other contemporary hymn writers, again to new tunes and to traditional tunes. I think of all of the new hymn books, I think this, in many ways, is the perfect combination of old and new that works for many different church traditions. And one other book, which I think is also worth exploring, is published by the Royal School of Church Music. As you can see here, it's a very well-used copy. This is a book called In Every Corner Sing, which is edited by Jeff Weaver, who does a lot of work with the Royal School of Church Music in terms of workshops and in terms of introducing music from across the world church. It contains songs, sections on praise, worship, short chants, liturgical sections, and incorporates melodies and songs from right across the world. They're all done in a really, really simple way, so it works for choirs and it works for congregations. And in many ways, if you want to really expand the music offering in church, this is a really, really good book to do that with. So now we want to explore 2 or 3 more hymns to really kind of broaden the horizons from traditional hymnody. We began just now with From Ashes to the Living Font, and now Above the Voices of the World Around Me. It's to words by Timothy Dudley Smith, the hymn writer who's perhaps best known for Woodlands, for Tell Out My Soul the Greatness of the Lord. He's a retired bishop of the Church of England and has written around 400 hymns. Let's hear verse 1 of this hymn. That's a really good example of a hymn for Lent that uses a tune that's universally well known to setting of new words. Perhaps 2 of the best known hymn writers in the United Kingdom currently are Bernadette Farrell and John Bell. Bernadette Farrell is best known for O God, You Search Me and You Know Me, a setting of Psalm 139, which we'll sing a little bit of in a moment. She's always had a passion for social justice, and that comes to the fore in many of her songs. Born in West Yorkshire in the north of England, she's lived in London for many years. Currently, she's a community organiser for UK Citizens, which advocates for fair housing, a living wage, proper community policing, and healthcare access. This setting, O God, You Search Me and You Know Me, paraphrases Psalm 139. What I should have said at the beginning is that on the for those who are viewing through the St Martin's digital platform, you'll see a link to the order of service for a little bit later on, and you'll be able to download a PDF which has got the words of the first 2 songs that we sang, and also of this song, O God, You Search Me. So let's sing verses 1, 2, and the last verse, verse 5. That setting is available both as a single melody line, but also with simple choir parts as well. So it's a great piece that you can use for congregation music making, but also as a simple choir anthem. And many of these settings we work with that dual use as well. Looking at contemporary hymn writers, we have to mention John Bell, hymn writer, composer, lecturer and broadcaster, and an ordained minister of the Church of Scotland and member of the Iona community. With his colleagues, he's produced over 15 collections of songs and a wide range of liturgical materials, particularly for use by lay people. One of his main achievements was the production of a substantial hymnal for the Church of Scotland called Hymns of Glory, Songs of Praise. Like Bernadette Farrell, John Bell really reflects on themes of social justice, and many of his hymns tell a story. And we're going to hear one of them now, Travelling the Road to Freedom. The beauty of many of these new hymn books that I showed you earlier is that as well as hymns, they also contain sections with short chants, often from the Taizé community, but also chants by John Bell and others. And we're going to hear one or two of these now. To start with, we're going to explore two Taizé chants. Obviously, the most famous Taizé chants are things like Ubi Caritas or O Lord, hear my prayer. But two chants that are particularly appropriate for Lent are Jesus Remember Me, which is one of the more well-known Taizé chants, and also God is Forgiveness, which is something I discovered on a visit to Taizé a number of years ago. We'll start by hearing Jesus Remember Me. This is something that, and with Taizé chants we can be really flexible, sometimes sing the words in unison, sometimes if you've got a small choir, being able to sing the parts in harmony, being able to hum the melody. And there's many resources that Taizé community offers in terms of adding different instruments and descant lines to make these chants really, really beautiful and flexible. This chant either works as a standalone, doing it a single time in terms of a prayer response, or can do it multiple times in terms of a meditative or a more meditative service. So this is the chant Jesus Remember Me, and let's sing it 3 times. And then the other chant we'll be singing now is something that's less familiar. God is forgiveness. This is something that I discovered as I said earlier, when I was over in Thésée, and I think it's one of the most beautiful chants, particularly for the season of Lent. To finish off this section, before we move into our final act of worship, a setting of the Kyrie. There are many settings, musical settings of the Kyrie, from chanted settings to congregational settings to more complex choral arrangements. This is a setting that I found in the book In Every Corner Sing, edited by Jeff Weaver, that I talked about a little bit early on. It's from Ghana. And it's a really, really beautiful melody that really does enter the spirit, and I think is a very, very appropriate melody for the season of Lent. So I hope that's given you a little bit of an introduction to some new music that you might want to explore this Lent. Hymns with new words and new melodies, and some less known chants, but all of which I think are absolutely beautiful. Andy.
Thank you. And we really do hope that some of that is useful. And we're going to finish with an act of worship. And I think you've taken my order of service. Have you got one? Yes. He's stolen my order of service. So those who are in the building, you might like to have one of these handy and join in. So what we're going to do is put some of that together. I'm taking this from this Liturgies from Lindisfarne by Ray Simpson, which is a lovely book with lots of very evocative kind of liturgy in it. And we're going to, let's pause for a moment's quiet as we shift gear before we start this evening prayer. and we begin with the hymn, From Ashes to the Living Font. Holy God, you call us to throw off whatever clouds your will. We will struggle with Christ against wrong. We will share with Christ his trials. We will embrace with him the suffering of the world. Psalm 139.
Ever
Prayers of forgiveness. Father Creator, we have raped and spoiled your world. God, forgive us. Jesus, Saviour, we have ignored your teachings and warnings. God, forgive us. Spirit, Sustainer, we have tried to live without you. God, forgive us. For every sin we have ever thought or done, God, forgive us. For everything we have sought outside your love, God, forgive us. For every wasted moment, God, forgive us. For every ill intent towards another, God, forgive us. For every failure of love towards your creation, God, forgive us. We will leave behind prejudice and meanness of spirit. We will play our part in the kingdom of your love. A reading now.
A reading from Luke chapter 14. Now large crowds were travelling with him, and he turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king, going out to wage war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So, therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions."
Christ of the scars, into your hands we place the broken and the wounded. We especially remember the people of Ukraine in their suffering. Christ of the scars, into your hands we place the victims of violence and false accusation. Christ of the scars, into your hands we place the refugees and the hungry. Christ of the scars, into your hands we place those who we are especially concerned for at this time, whose names we hold in our hearts. The closing prayer. May the Christ who walked on wounded feet walk with us on the road. May the Christ who serves with wounded hands stretch out our hands to serve. May the Christ who loves with a wounded heart open our hearts to love.
Me.
So thank you so much for joining us today. Those of you who are here, thank you for coming in person. It's nice to have people in the building with us. And those who are online, thank you for joining with us. And those who will watch the video when we share it afterwards as well. We are planning to do music and liturgy for Easter on Saturday the 19th of March. Yes, so very soon. So do join us for that as well, and do let us know what you think. What do you want more of? What was helpful? I hope that some of that has been useful for you, and I hope that you've enjoyed being with us today. Thank you.